This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The tractors hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through a velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Join you with the Cinephile, unseen, unseen. The tales twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 345. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So for this one here is going to be my Scouring Through the Sixes, episode number 8. So for the first featured review here, I have Thrash. This is here from 2026, and I'm pairing it up with A Face in the Fog from 1936. So we're looking at a 90-year gap there, and this double feature here is B movies that are spanning that long kind of gap there, as one of these is going to be a kind of creature feature that is a little bit silly compared to some of the other ones that might come out in that one, and then A Face in the Fog just didn't have the biggest budget, is a poverty row film, so that's kind of the double feature there. So then mini reviews here, I have Rawhead Rex. This is my Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch from 1986, and then I have Redux Redux or Redo, whatever it actually is, that's from 2025, and that one I actually covered earlier in the year. I'll get into that more. I have two shorts that I gave review to, both of them featuring Timothy J. Cox, and that is going to be Unfortunate Fortune and then Let Dan Go. And then I have documentary here of Still Screaming, the ultimate scary movie retrospective. I think that's what the subtitle is there. As well as I'm doing 2 episodes of 100 Years of Horror. So that's all I have here then for this intro, outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming this journey with me.
Just wait until Father gets home. Those words chilled us all as a child. Now they can thrill us as adults. My name is Dan B. Fierce, author of the book Father Figure, Suspenseful Tales of Fatherhood. The calloused hands of fear will wrap around the mind in this roller coaster collection of extreme, gory, and psychological short stories and flash fiction. Get your copy of Father Figure today at danbfiercebooks.com.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
And my first mini review here is going to be Rawhead Rex from 1986, directed by George Pavlou. This is written by Clive Barker. This is starring David Dukes, Kelly Piper, and Hugh O'Connor. This is a folk horror fantasy mystery thriller film that is a co-production between a few different places here, which is Ireland, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and the United States. This is currently sitting on a 5.2 on IMDb and a 2.7 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: Ireland will never be the same after Rawhead Rex, a particularly nasty demon, is released from his underground prison by an unwitting farmer. The film follows Rex's cross-country rampage while a man struggles to stop it. So I'd actually heard about this film from reading the Books of Blood by Clive Barker. Now, I will not compare too much because I don't really remember a whole lot about the short story. I do know that I rather enjoyed it and found the creature of Rawhead Rex to be quite interesting. Now, with that said, this film's screenplay was also written by Barker, and I have now given this another rewatch here. I know the first time I did it was for the podcast Under the Stairs, and then I've also done another show with Duncan where I just did like a couple scenes here and there from this movie, but then this is going to be an actually Scouring Through the Sixes watch for this. So I'm going to start with this review is giving credit here to the creature, and it is played by Heinrich von Schefflendorf. Now, while the first glimpses are effective and he provides like a physically foreboding presence, the effect falters once you see Rawhead Rex clearly later in the movie. The visible mask interior and the actor's mouth are distracting. Other gore effects are adequate as the creature rampages, killing only men, which aligns with the source material's spirit. So the history and the folklore of Rawhead Rex are really the highlights. As a pagan deity predating Christianity, his rampage against only male personifies his aggressive masculinity. Local church depictions like the sunlight refracting stained glass draw hero Howard Hallenbeck, portrayed by Dukes, to the village to research churches that are built over Neolithic sites. So this omits some details that would clarify certain plot points. While the farmer accidentally freeing the creature works well, the transformation of the priest Declan O'Brien, portrayed by Ronan Wilmot, into a disciple of Rawhead Rex via the altar feels underdeveloped. Given that Reverend Coot, portrayed by Nao Tobin, Howard and the other woman are merely just kind of injured or burned by the same object, it is unclear why Declan becomes a follower. More context is required to explain the specific outcome here. I mean, it could also be that he's just kind of harboring some dark, deep things here, and this is making this come forward. So it makes sense for the story how it flows, as well as staying in line with the short story to have Declan want to help this monstrous entity. I think what happens when the two finally meet makes more sense for him to become a follower, even though it's disgusting. I interpreted that Declan must have some deep desires, like I was saying, which is why he's susceptible to the creature, and if this is the case, that's great that he's a Catholic priest and such a duality of that position. So then, the subject of duality, this film is highly sexualized without being over the top. The artifact that can defeat Rawhead is a primitive depiction of a woman. The monster encounters a pregnant lady who isn't killed during her encounter. Howard and his wife Elaine, who is portrayed by Piper, they talk dirty to each other and kind of really helps develop them as a couple. And we actually see another couple making out in front of the guy's younger brother while he's sitting across from them. There's also a film being watched where two people are kissing. Now, how Rawhead Rex is defeated would also fall into this category. So this is also exploring like folk horror themes through the unearthing of a history buried beneath a church. The beast return corrupts the institution, notably through the inverted sacrament of Declan's baptism. As a primal patriarch, Rex embodies toxic masculine aggression, eventually countered by matriarchal forces. This struggle highlights a breakdown of rational science where only pagan rituals can defeat the monster. So regarding those performances, Duke excels with his sarcasm as a character's intellectual drive following the family tragedy through emotional range is limited. I will say some of the things that he says and how he says them, it reminds me of me with my wife, and yeah, she does not like it sometimes. Then we have Piper, Cora Lunny, and Hugh O'Connor are solid despite limited screen time, effectively supporting the mission to stop the beast. Wilmot's performance is appropriately theatrical, while Tobin, Niall O'Brien, and their supporting cast fit the roles as needed. Additionally, Heinrich von Schleckendorf, he has such an imposing physical presence as the monster, like I've already said, that I just want to give credit again. So the filmmaking is competent, effectively using cinematography to contrast the vast landscape with the small town setting. The police inability to handle this threat adds to the tension. Excellent practical effects and set pieces, including the church, grove, and caravan park, enhance the experience. Despite uneven pacing, the sound design and music successfully build atmosphere, making Rawhead Rex a great watch regardless of minor flaws. In conclusion, this is a compelling folk horror that, despite uneven pacing and some dated creature effects, effectively use its atmosphere and themes to deliver an engaging experience. With solid performances and fascinating exploration of ancient masculine aggression confronted by primal forces, it remains a notable entry of the genre with its unique blend of dread and mythological narrative. So my rating here then for Rawhead Rex, I give this one, after both watches, a 7 out of 10. Then up next here, I have a rewatch of Redux Redux or Redo. This is from 2025, wide released here in 2026. And then this is written and directed between Kevin McManus and Matthew McManus. And then this is starring Michaela McManus, as well as Stella Marcus and Jeremy Holm. This is an action, adventure, crime, drama, fantasy, horror, sci-fi, thriller film. A lot of stuff to be packed in there. This is from the United States. The synopsis: Irene Kelly travels through parallel universes, repeatedly killing her daughter's murderer. As she becomes consumed by vengeance, her humanity hangs in the balance. So Irene is actually going to be portrayed by Michaela McManus there. And then this is a featured review back on episode 330 if you'd like to hear a bit more. Then the ratings: IMDb has this as a 6.2, Letterboxd is a 2.3. Key themes here: the psychological toll of vengeance and the weight of canon events across the multiverse. So this is actually a grounded multiverse look. This isn't your flashy, big budget sci-fi. It's very lo-fi, taking on parallel universes where Irene, who is played excellently by Michaela, uses a machine that looks hauntingly like a coffin to jump between worlds. It's grounded, practical, and feels incredibly lived in. So we have a loop of violence here. We follow Irene on a dark mission to kill Neville, who's portrayed by Holm, the man who actually murdered her daughter in her universe, and it seems to be that way in every other universe as well. This starts with her watching him burn, immediately establishing a depraved, hardened protagonist who has lost her sense of self in a cycle of grief and murder. There's also a character study of two. The heart of this shifts when Irene rescues Mia, portrayed by Marcus, a resourceful 15-year-old and Neville's next victim. Watching her dynamic is fascinating. Irene tries to protect Mia's humanity while grappling with her own, questioning if revenge is a price too high to pay. Though this is defining the horror, while it defies it in a traditional sense with the tropes, the dread is palpable. The horror stems from psychological weight of Neville's heinous acts, who remains a haunting specter throughout. The terrifying realization that tragedies might be canon events no matter where you run. And then we have some standout performances here by Michaela McManus and Marcus anchor the film with superb top performances. Holm as a villainous Neville is good. And we also have a supporting role here, cameo almost, of Jim Cummings. He further elevates the tension. Well, he doesn't. He actually, well, as things kind of get more tense, that does happen there, I guess, but leading to a climax that is genuinely chilling. The final verdict: while this might not require a second watch to catch hidden details, it's a solid, well-made indie thriller that uses a sci-fi framework to ask profound questions about obsession and the human psyche. So my rating here then for Redux Redux, Redo, whatever it's going to be, 8.5 out of 10, and would recommend at least giving this one a watch if you haven't yet. Then I have one of two shorts I got to check out as screeners, and the first one's going to be Unfortunate Fortune from 2026, written and directed by, actually we have two of people here, Adam and Ryan Daly. And then this is starring Timothy J. Cox, Diane M. Strom, and George R. Hildebrand. So this is a drama that's from the United States, currently sitting on an 8.8 on IMDb, and not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say about a 4-star over there, with the synopsis being: a man down on his luck visits a fortune teller with the hopes of a big score, only to discover that while fortune smiles on some, it may lead to destruction for others. So this is a short that I got to see thanks to Cox. He sent over a press release along with a screener link. Since he's local to my area that I'm from, I decided to check out everything that he sends to me regardless of the genre. I did come to this one blind just for that information there. So this one here, we start with two guys. We have Todd, portrayed by Cox, and he's seen a fortune teller portrayed by Jay Buchheim, something like that. Todd is antsy and told to be quiet. So the fortune teller needs silence in order to see what his future looks like. What we'll learn is that Todd needs money. He recently lost his job and his wife is estranged, and she is Kate, portrayed by Strom. Now what the fortune teller can tell him is that he sees the number 5. He also sees Kate smiling. This gets Todd agitated and he storms out. He starts to look for signs. There's a lotto ticket that sticks to him. It is for an upcoming drawing for like millions of dollars. There are 5 numbers on it, all containing the number 5. He thinks that his fortunes are changing. When he gets home, he gets a call from Kate asking to see him. Now she comes over and hears him out. He wants to do a vacation that they've always talked about. She's leery about what he's saying, but we see her put some papers away. So as the numbers for the drawing is coming closer, 2 guys leave Todd's house. They are Tommy Stephenson and Patrick Lamba. His father also comes over, Rick, portrayed by Hildebrand. Things aren't necessarily lining up, but his father also knows more than why Kate came over. Todd in his state has made some horrible decisions, and now he's spiraling out of control even more. So that's really my recap introduction to the characters. Where I'm going to start is that this is a short film that runs 9 minutes. They're able to set up a story that is a gut-punching ending, and I appreciated that. There's a tagline of on the poster that says, "Some people just can't catch a break," and that really truly encapsulates this story. Now, starting with our lead of Todd, I can relate with his lack of luck, though my wife Jamie provides the stability that he lacks. Estranged from Kate, and struggling with his job loss and anger, Todd visits a fortune teller seeking hope. However, he becomes dangerously obsessed, overanalyzing the predictions. So that leads me to this theme here of self-fulfilling prophecies. The fortune teller said that his wife was smiling, which Todd points out is something she hasn't done or doesn't do in regard to him. The last time was at his mother's funeral. The other aspect is that there's a number 5. Todd starts to see signs. He's convinced that because he found this lotto ticket with 5 numbers, all with the number 5, that he's going to win $5 million. He starts to plan like he's already won. He definitely goes all in, which makes sense for what we get in the end. Other themes to include here would be like that of accountability versus desperation. Instead of working on himself, he goes for the supernatural quick fix, which snowballs into what happens. There is an irony surrounding luck and fate. I've already brought up his misinterpretation of the signs. There's this cognitive bias that stems from all of this. The last thing would be like the domino effect of self-destruction. Once he started down this path, he cannot stop. Moving over to our acting performances, Cox is great here. I can just feel the desperation there. The stress and tension rise from each decision as he becomes more manic with each one. Strom is good. I love that as a viewer, we know that she has more bad news for him. She does attempt to humor him, though, just in case. Hildebrand is fine as Todd's father. Their dynamic is interesting and intriguing, how he contributes to what we see. Buchheim, Stevenson, and Lamba also round this off for what was needed. All this left to be the filmmaking aspect. Starting with the cinematography and framing, they're good. They're able to capture the area that's all set, feels familiar, which is good. Something to credit is that they're able to capture the tension that builds with each decision that Todd makes, setting up this climactic gut punch. The limited effects that we get are good. The music and sound design fit for what was needed. For a short like this, I think that it effectively tells a complete story, so credit there. In conclusion, this is a compelling short film that effectively explores poignant themes of desperation and self-destruction. Though strong lead performances, polished filmmaking, it delivers a memorable and powerful message about the dire consequences of seeking supernatural quick fixes over personal accountability. So my rating for this one, I rather enjoyed what we got here, and I give this one an 8 out of 10. And the last short I'm going to cover here is Let Dan Go from 2026, directed by Ariel Carroll, and written by Timothy J. Cox. This is starring Ashley Lahorn, Cox, and Daniel Greisheimer. This is a drama from the United States, currently sitting on a 7.4 on IMDb, and I would say about a 3.5 to a 4-star over on Letterboxd with a synopsis being. Several years after a car accident that took his son Dan's life, his father Harry, still grieving, reconnects with Dan's girlfriend, Abby, to celebrate Dan's life and reconcile their loss. So Dan is portrayed by Greisheimer. The father is going to be Harry, portrayed by Cox, and then Abby is going to be portrayed by Lawhorn. So this is when I got an opportunity to see when the writer and star here of Cox reached out with another press release and a screener link. Since Cox, again, is local to where I live, I can check out everything regardless of genre. Other than that, I did come into this one blind. So we start by seeing a hole-in-the-wall bar called O'Malley's. Dan is approached by a woman, Abby, as he's leaving. She is upset with him for getting drunk like he has. She tries to take his keys, but he refuses. There's a heartbreaking moment where we see just her give up. She can't do this anymore. Dan gets behind the wheel. This leads to a tragedy from the synopsis. So then the short shifts over to a park. Harry is sitting and waiting. That's when Abby approaches. She looks content, less stressed than when we saw her first time. So the two then chat and catch up with each other about where they are in life, and we get a glimpse as to how this event has affected them and changed as they try to move on. So that's how they recap introduction to the characters. This short runs about 17 minutes and is broken into 2 sections for the most part. So the first is us getting to meet Dan before a horrible decision that takes his life. What is interesting is that we actually get to meet Abby when she's stressed about the situation. We also see Abby being devastated by what happened, with a quick scene kind of in the middle before we get to the second part where we meet Harry. Now, since I came to this one blind, it took me a bit to understand who these two were and how they were connected. Once I did, it was equal parts heartwarming and breaking. I can connect with both individuals. I was no longer with her, but I did have an ex-girlfriend pass away from a car accident. It's a surreal feeling. I'm also a father, and I don't know how I could manage losing a child like Harry does. It is interesting to hear both of them share what they've done since and how it's kind of just affected them and what they're doing to move forward. Something else I do want to give credit to would be the independent, lower budget effort that strips away the typical handling of stories like this. It is a grounded and quiet take versus the more grand, overblown handling of a heavy story. It is subdued while still carrying the weight that is something to be appreciated. It's a simple approach showing that talking can be a cathartic way of handling it. Other themes that would be explored here, like the term of like long-term loss. There's also grief here. We hear Dan's mother. We hear about her, what she's done since it happened and how she isn't handling it well. Dan isn't forgotten by Harry and Abby. What has happened changed them, but they're moving forward as they manage the grief in a healthy way. There's a heartwarming look that trauma can be an unlikely bridge forming a friendship over a shared event. Now, something else that I want to include for the short films, I do think that this tells a complete story. Could it be fleshed out into something larger? Yes, but I don't think we need that. The emotional weight that it carries and it presents in a short time is great. It could also almost lose some of what it continued on. That's not to say that I wouldn't watch it if that was the route that they went. Now, what I also would say here with the actor performances, that Rawhead and Cox truly carry this. How they play well off each other in a muted but powerful back and forth dialogue is great. I also like that for the Abby character, we see her stress about Dan. She gives up on him, and then we see her distraught over what happened and how heavy it was. I do like that for the Dan character. We do get to meet him before everything happens, so we kind of have a little bit of a stake in the game there. Greichheimer is good at setting the stage for that character. They also love to be some filmmaking aspects. What they're able to capture and frame with the cinematography is great. I've been to a place like this where we start. I could also have made similar bad decision. Watching this made me sick to my stomach of what could have happened. So this weight that this carries is well done. Then how they frame the tranquil park scene with our leads is great. This is a simple in what it does, but it also captures that magic for what was needed. So in conclusion, this is a poignant exploration of grief that succeeds through its grounded and subdued approach. By stripping away the melodrama, often found in stories of loss, it allows the heavy themes of trauma and reconciliation to resonate naturally. The powerful performances by Rawhead and Cox, paired with evocative cinematography, captures both the darkness of the past and the tranquility of the present, transform the short film into a deeply impactful 17-minute experience that stays with you long after the credits roll. So my rating, though, for this one, I gave Let Dan Go an 8 out of 10. And I watched the documentary Still Screaming, the ultimate scary movie retrospective. This is written and directed by Ryan Turek. It features the likes of David Arquette, Brian Avery, and Lisa Beach. This is a documentary about the horror film, of course, of Scream. Actually, this is about the trilogy that originally had came out a while ago, so like not any of the movies past number 3. So it's also kind of be considered teen horror in there as well. This is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 7.3 on IMDb and a 3.5 on Letterboxd with a synopsis being: a year in the making, Still Screaming is the definitive documentary on the making of the iconic Scream movies. Dive into the fascinating success of the story for the classic trilogy with on-set footage, photos, and dozens of brand new interviews with the cast and crew from all the films, including Wes Craven, Neve Campbell, Liev Schreiber, Henry Winkler, Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, Laurie Metcalf, Parker Posey, Scott Foley, and many others. So, of course, this was written and directed by Ryan Turek and produced by Anthony Massey. So, I had learned about this when I was looking through Letterboxd for the top-rated horror docs that I hadn't seen, or the most popular. I'm not really sure what my default is on there. So, reflecting back, I used to listen to the Shockwaves podcast. Turek was a host on there, and he was also the writer-director here, like I've been saying. Now, for myself, I was a big fan of Scream when it first hit VHS. I still enjoy the franchise overall. It's probably one of even my least favorite entries are still entertaining. So I decided to watch this one late at work and treating it like a podcast and everything like that. And what I go ahead and say is, ahead of seeing this, I watched a month prior the Scream Inside Story. That one just covered the first film, bringing up what pushed into the sequel. It is interesting that this documentary came out the same year. What I like is that this one goes deeper into not only the first film, but the trilogy that was out at the time this was made. This is considering itself the definitive documentary. I have to say that there's a lot of good information here. So when I watch these type of docs, I like seeing like the behind the scenes footage, hearing from the people that were in the works to get their experiences and any anecdotes. Plus, hearing from the people that came up with the ideas or what the contributions that they had to make. I also like to hear about any of the things that they had struggles with trying to get it to, be made and everything like that. So this one, like I said, does a great job here of getting the likes of Craven, Arquette, Campbell, Posey. They even do like Marco Beltrami, who was the composer, Lillard, and others to make it worth it. It's just fun to kind of hear what they went through to help create the phenomenon, and then what has come from the series that is still going. So what also helps is that this is a professional-looking documentary. One of my gripes with the Inside Story is it felt like a TV episode, and if memory serves, that was a show that would do like feature-length docs, but I mean they were for TV. This one's more cinematic. I like the quick cuts they do. These are like little information bits that we'll get, and it might not have a place in the grand scheme, but editing and footage to show what they're talking about throughout this adds to everything. This also flies by, which is something I have to give credit to. So in conclusion, this stands as a definitive, cinematic, and fast-paced documentary that is a must-watch for fans of the series. Its deep dive into the original trilogy, paired with valuable interviews from the cast and crew, make it an essential look at the legacy of the horror phenomenon. So my rating here for Still Screaming, the ultimate scary movie retrospective, I give this one a 7 out of 10, and I believe I actually watch this on YouTube if you are curious. I believe this is also on like the Blu-ray disc as a special feature on there as well. And I'll end this out doing 2 more episodes of 100 Years of Horror. And the next one, episode 5, is going to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So this one is a look at the many interpretations of Robert Louis Stevenson's classic tale of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This features archive footage for the most part and some interviews. These are going to include people like Bud Abbott, John Agar, and Roy Ward Baker. So, of course, documentary horror thing that we're getting. So, some of the things that were kind of interesting here that get brought up is that in the original story, it actually hides the fact that Dr. Jekyll is Mr. Hyde. The film versions don't really do that. I think a lot of it they're playing on the fact that most people already know the story inside and out, so they just kind of run with what they do. So, 1913 was an early adaptation of this. So then they bring up here the big production of this in 1920 that had John Barrymore. They had a cool effect of like a ghostly spider taking him over, signifying the change that can't be stopped. They did a lot of times here light on the makeup for the change where you'd have it, you'd film a little bit, and then you'd keep kind of progressively doing it. Paramount hired Frederick March, a light comedic actor, to take on the role after that, and he ended up, I think it was almost like 10 years later, 20 years later, something like that. But he won the Oscar, and his was much more ape-like. There's another kind of versions here, like Black Friday. This one actually features Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Spencer Tracy was a pretty much shot-for-shot remake of the March version. Ingrid Bergman was in that one too. I didn't love that one as well. She was great. And Spencer was fine in his role on it, but that movie just didn't stick with me as well. George Zucco is another one who took on the role. So Glenn Strange did it. There's a couple different movies that had different names, like How to Make a Monster was that. That one actually took place in a swamp. I have not watched that one yet. It's on my list. The story actually went in public domain in 1942, so anybody could do it. Abbott and Costello met Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the 1940s. I do love that we get interviews here, once again, by Sarah Karloff, who, as she talks about her father, as he kind of dabbled into this one. Fred Olen Ray, he's just a low-budget filmmaking, just legend. Other forms would be The Nutty Professor or The Daughter of Dr. Jekyll, or different takes on this. This actually became more popular as well in the 50s as sci-fi horror kind of built up. I didn't realize the hideous sun demon, which was caused by atomic energy from the sun, actually kind of falls into this type of story. John Agar was in The Hand of Death. Fun to hear his interview about kind of his experiences. Karloff came back to do this in The Grip of the Strangler, aka The Haunted Strangler. There's actually one in Japan called The Manster. This actually, I think, was a co-production. This is like a murderous two-headed monster. That's kind of funny there. Then when we jump into the 60s, we have like Hammer did one with Paul Massey. Christopher Lee was actually in it. He is like a friend who is kind of nefarious. And then in 71, they also did another take of this, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which I'm a big fan of this movie. Ralph Bates and Martine Beswick are the two versions there. Baker was a director on that one. Lee did a take for Amicus, which was I, Monster. I've seen this one as well. Cushing's in that film, but Lee was annoyed that they had every character had the correct name except Dr. Jekyll, which is just kind of weird that they did that. So that's kind of my thoughts here then for this episode. I gave it a 7 out of 10. And then chapter 6 is going to be werewolves, where they examine the history of the werewolf film, focusing on the work of Lon Chaney Jr. and Michael Landon. So this one also is going to feature stuff here from like archive footage and interviews from the likes of Abbott, Evelyn Ankers, and Ralph Bellamy. So this one here is that Christopher Lee actually kicks us off, referencing the fact that he was in The Howling 2, which I have a lot of time for. A very early take on this one would be like Werewolf of London, decent little flick I've seen. I didn't realize Jack Pierce did the makeup in that film. Bellamy was the Wolfman for that one. We also get interviews here by Gary Chaney, who is Lon's grandson. Kind of really heartwarming because I've heard about how later in Lon's career that he definitely had his battles with alcoholism. So hearing somebody who was able to kind of see the human side of him in those darker years is something that's very heartwarming. There's a hilarious interview in this from Richard Denning, who was Ankers' husband, and how him and Chaney went back and forth one day, where Denning was serving in the military. Lon Chaney obviously is an actor, and they just had some stuff that was just kind of funny. A real-life basis, though, for the werewolf mythos seems to be a man claimed that a magic belt was given to him by Satan as he was doing rituals and everything, and it allowed him to turn into a wolf. I know that I've actually seen a documentary about where they think the history of this came in, and it was just how brutal his attacks on his victims were, that they didn't think a man could do it, so they thought that it was a werewolf. And then he actually, going back to Chaney was talking to his grandson, he said how uncomfortable and tedious and unpleasant it was to wear all of the makeup as the Wolfman, because Wolfman, one of the pinnacles of this as well. We actually get an interview here by Bela Jr. He's back. The House of Terror was Chaney going down to Mexico to take on a similar role. What's kind of interesting there is it actually sounds like there was a stuntman who did a lot of what was done there, but there were times where Chaney was in it. And then Route 66 was a TV show with Chaney and Peter Lorre to show that the makeup still worked. Then there's some other versions like I Was a Teenage Werewolf. AIP was doing like a different, fresh take with a younger cast to try to get people to go to like the drive-in. I'm a big fan when they started talking about Hammer here with Curse of the Werewolf with my boy Oliver Reed that is. And it was actually his first starring role, which I didn't realize. And then this kind of ends out here with things like An American Werewolf in London, Wolf with Jack Nicholson. That latter one actually pays homage to Werewolf of London as well. So yeah, another one that I thought was kind of fun with some of the information they share here. Give this one as well a 7 out of 10. And then also kind of bearing up here one last time before I close this out, I love that Hugh Hefner was such a film archivist, and like his interviews are very kind of interesting, especially because when he grew up. But yeah, that's all I have here then for mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Man, that's coming in fast.
Must be a big one.
The National Hurricane Center has issued hurricane surge warnings for this area.
Just breathe.
They're saying it could be a Category 5.
That's what they always say, and then everything turns out to be fine.
Jesus Christ. Lisa! Get to high ground! Go, go!
Several towns are cut off from any rescue attempts. We're sending our prayers to the people of those towns. I can't imagine the dangers they're facing.
There's no people, no car.
Just a little bit away.
Sharks on the loose! In the Category 5 storm! Let's move!
I am not gonna have him die before he gets to take his first breath. Here they come! Bet you never saw this on Shark Week.
And for my first featured review is going to be Thrash from 2026, written and directed by Tommy Vircola. This is starring Phoebe Dynevor, I think that's how you say that, Whitney Peak, and Djimon Hounsou. We'll also have in the likes here of Alala Brown, Stacey Clausen, Dante Ubaldi, Sammy Fafuni, Tyler Coppen, Adam Dunn, Chai Hansen, Annabelle Mullion, Bert LeBon, Sayan Luxford, Amy Matthews, Josh McConville, Aaliyah Ngannou, Akasia Sabet, and Elijah Ungunveri. I might be mispronouncing some of those names, but I do apologize. So this is a disaster psychological thriller horror film. I also consider this to be like eco-horror in there as well. That is a co-production of Australia and the United States. Currently sitting on a 5.0 on IMDb and a 1.8 on Letterboxd, with a synopsis being: when a Category 5 hurricane decimates a coastal town, the storm surge brings devastation, chaos, and something far more frightening: hungry sharks. So this is a film that I heard about thanks to others in the horror community. The reviews were mixed from what I saw, with most people not necessarily being a big fan. Now, I decided to check this out as it was one of the more popular horror films from 2026 that I hadn't seen yet, and then there wasn't a new release at the theater, so I decided to make it a feature review here on the podcast. Now, what I didn't realize until settling in was that it was written and directed by Vercola, and I'll get into the reason why here, is I'm going to begin with his credits, as it's been a while since he's come up. And for this one, that would be season 1 on this podcast. He directed Dead Snow, like 1 and 2. I've seen 4 of his 13 works for 30%. 6 of what he's done is in genre. Everything that I've seen falls here, and I've watched 66% of his horror films. I have not seen The Trip or Kurt, Josef Wagel, and The Legend of the Fjord Witch. So as an assistant director here of Phil Jones, he's done this for 19 features. I've seen 2. Not Horror is Tomorrow When the War Began. He's done 2 in horror, with the other one being called Celia. Now, Vercola also wrote this. I've seen 4 of his 14 films for 28%. I've seen 4 of his 7 in genre for 57%. The only additional one that he didn't direct is going to be Kurt, Josef Wagel, and the murder mystery on the Herta Gruta, something like that. So then we move to our cast, starting with Divanor. She's been in 11 movies and 3 shorts. First of hers that I've seen. She has 2 in genre. The other one being Pendulum, which looks like it's actually set to be a 2027 film. Then over to Peak, who I've seen in a few things. She has 9 motion pictures and 1 short. Now, she has one that's a little bit like a broader, not necessarily a horror film, but very close to it. She was in Hocus Pocus 2. Now, she has 2 in genre. I've seen both now. The other one being Eye for an Eye, which I got to see as a screener. And then over to somebody up who's come up pretty regularly. I actually just watched another movie with him in it recently here as well. Is going to be Hansu. I've seen 23 of his 65 features for 35%. He's also been in 3 shorts. I have now seen 6 of his 7 in genre for 85%. I'm just missing the Vatican tapes at this time. All right, so for this film here, we start with setting the stage at the current state of the world. So hurricanes have been getting stronger and it's happening faster. This is alluding to global warming without being too in your face about it. We're then in a southern coastal town here of Annieville. We are introduced to the 4 groups that we're following. Now, first is Dakota, portrayed by Peak. She lives in her mother's house, who recently passed away. It has made her agoraphobic. We see her venturing out to get food, and as she's going to wait out the approaching storm, it's too much for her, so she goes back inside. Now, she has a connection to somebody else that we're following. They're just not currently in town. The next is going to be Lisa Fields, portrayed by Divanor. She is getting off of work and she's pregnant. I thought she was in the medical profession. She's actually part of this meat packing plant, something like that. She works in the front office there. But her mother is quite upset that she hasn't left town yet, and this woman would be Claire, portrayed by Mullion. Lisa isn't aware of how strong the storm is, and the highway is already shut down. Claire wants her to leave immediately. Something to include here is that she moved from New York for her fiancé, who has abandoned her to be a DJ and to play poker. Lisa didn't follow him on this wild dream, but, she is pregnant, so there is that. So we also have Dee, portrayed by Brown, Ron, portrayed by Clausen, and Will, portrayed by Ubaldi. They're out swimming by a river. They get yelled at by their foster father of Billy Olsen, portrayed by Nabel. He's afraid that they'll get bit by snakes or just get hurt, and then he'll have to pay for the hospital bills. But him and his wife Rachel, portrayed by Matthews, are using the kids for the checks they get from the government. Billy doesn't think the storm's going to be as bad as news says, so he's hunkering down and he's convinced that his reinforced windows will hold. And the last person to bring up here is going to be Dr. Dale Edwards, portrayed by Hansel. He is a marine biologist who studies sharks. They are studying a pregnant great white. Now, there's been some incidents of a school of bull sharks attacking people around, the coastline. So he is the uncle to Lisa. He's trying his best to help her work through her grief. He wants her to flee. She refuses. Not realizing how strong the storm is, he's making his way to her. There's a small news team here of Joe Sprinkle, portrayed by Lees, and then his cameraman is Doug, portrayed by Afuni. Now, they're trying to make their way to Annieville to help out Dale, but it seems to be a little bit too late here. So once the storm hits landfall, it is a race against time. The levees break, it floods the city, the storm knocks down trees, blocking people in and knocking out the power. The water also brings something else, like the synopsis says. It's a race to higher ground and avoid the hungry sharks that now patrol the streets. So let's leave my recap and introduction of the characters. I must note my affinity here for natural disaster films like this. The hurricane, escalated by environmental factors, devastates the city. I understand that the perspectives of the locals like the Olsons or Dakota, who have survived previous storms, having grown up in the Midwest and often ignoring tornado warnings myself until I had kids, I recognize how such threats can simply become like a routine part of life. The Olsens also add in this interesting dynamic as like Hicks, who don't believe in the fake news. Now, since we have so many films like this, you need to up the ante. In this case, sharks infest the city due to the water levels rising so high. That would be terrifying as all these characters get trapped, and as they try to get to higher ground, they need to get into the water. So there are 3 groups here that we follow, which in turn end up with like Lisa and Dakota coming together. Animal attack films along with natural disaster films, they fall into eco-horror for me. I like the concept that we get here. So I do want to shift over to a negative. I do think that having these 4 groups does keep things moving. An issue that I have, since it moves as rapidly as it did, I never truly connected with the characters. That hurts attention for me. Even though the situation gets worse, I never felt like they were actually in peril for the characters. That makes it interesting though, because like one is a group of kids who are in a foster parent's house. Lisa is pregnant and goes into labor. Regardless, this should work, but it's just missing that more intimate feel for me. So this also explores several themes here, notably unintended consequences where like sharks invading this town represent nature reclaiming human spaces. Interesting family dynamics also emerge, like Dale supports Dakota despite not being her father, while Dakota overcomes her fears to assist Lisa, who is an expecting mother. There's also this element of overcoming fear in order to survive. That's kind of plays in there with Dakota for sure. Critiques of capitalism and the global warming are present, even though the predatory foster parents and Lisa being trapped by an unimportant job during the disaster. So I do like kind of incorporating those things because it definitely adds an element there. Now I do want to shift over to finish out with the filmmaking aspects. I've already said that this struggled to build tension for me. Now I do think that this is well made. The cinematography and framing to set up the town were good. Then having the disaster hit was solid. Seeing it flood was great. I even think that what they did with the sharks looks good. I do have some nitpicks with the lack of blood on a wound. The CGI for the most part was fine. I'd say the music and sound design fit for what was needed. I did almost like this like Flores lava geography thing that adds tension at times, because of course you get in the water, you can be attacked. Also, something to be the acting performances before I do a little bit of trivia. I did think that this was solid across the board. Divanor and Peak play well off each other. I do like the younger woman is dealing with her issue stemming from losing her mother. Now she must help this expecting mother to survive. There's a great callback here with a home movie as well with something that happens there. Hanso works as his person who is coming to save his niece. Brown, Clausen, and Ubaldi work along with Nabel and Matthews in that little group there. I'd also say that from there, the rest of the supporting cast fit for what was needed for their different roles and everything like that. So then, for some trivia, although Thrash takes place on a coastal town reminiscent of South Carolina, the majority of this filming occurred in and around Melbourne, Australia. Originally intended for theatrical release until Sony sold it to Netflix. An outdoor mega tank, a purpose-built tank in a parking lot at Dockland Studios held approximately 2 million liters of water. This was used to create the central town square. So Shark special effects director Vercola used a mix of techniques to bring these creatures to life. Practical and animatronic elements. During filming in the Melbourne water tanks, the crew used practical props for close-range interactions. Some people noted that this helps maintain the tension through the murky underwater scenes. I definitely agreed there. There's a few times where I was like, that looks actually real. Some CGI for the action, while the practical models were used for some of the shots. Digital effects were heavily employed for more complex attacks and high-speed movements. Some people think that this is grossly or gruesomely competent or fairly decent, although some felt the green screen work was occasionally visible. I did notice that near the end where I could tell that it was definitely green screen. So then Divanor and Mullion play mother and daughter despite being American characters are both English. The word thrash in the title refers to the violent movement sharks use when they're eating their prey, and South Carolina does not require front license plates, and I can give another fun fact, neither does Ohio anymore. So in conclusion, this is a competently made eco-horror film that effectively utilizes its premise of sharks invading a flooded town to create intense, disaster-driven stakes. While the film succeeds in its technical execution, including a solid cinematography and visual effects, it struggles to foster a deep emotional connection with its characters, which slightly diminish the overall tension. Despite these narrative shortcomings, the performances were solid across the board, and the movie successfully weaves themes of survival, environmental consequence, and family dynamics into its rapid, action-packed narrative. So my rating, though, for this one, just because I did have some issues and everything like that, I came in with a 6.5 out of 10. I don't think this is a bad movie. I do think it, like I said, falls short for things, but I'm not going to do a spoiler section, not anything deeper I need to do there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
Get me away from here, anywhere.
And for my second featured review is going to be A Face in the Fog from 1936. This is directed by Robert F. Hill. So then the screenplay was written by Al Martin, but Peter B. Kyne did the novel that the great Mono Miracle with this is based from. This stars June Collier, Lloyd Hughes, and Lawrence Gray, while also featuring here the likes of Jack Mahal, Al St. John, John Coel, John Elliott, Sam Flint, Forrest Taylor, George Ball Trio, Ramsdale Dancers, Donna Lee Trio, George Ball, Ed Cassidy, Lane Chandler, Eddie Dunn, Olin Francis, and Hill actually appears here as well. Actually, just kind of realized George Ball will be part of the George Ball Trio, and then we also had other people there that were also double billed. So then this is a whodunit mystery thriller film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.6 on IMDb and actually not enough ratings on Letterboxd for an average, so about a 2 to 2.5 star movie over there, with our synopsis being: a mysterious killer known as the Fiend uses an unusual bullet as his trademark for his murders. So this is a film that I learned about when I was compiling my list for 1936. I'll be honest, my initial thought was that this could be like a Jack the Ripper story because of the fog being in the title, and a lot of those like to use the London fog as a thing. It was during the opening credits that I realized it was based on a novel that I had brought up, The Great Mono Miracle by Kyne. So that meant, aside from lining up the title, year, and runtime, I came to this one blind. So let's do some feature notes first, and I'll start with our director of Hill, who actually just recently came up. He was actually the director of the film that I did last week from 1936. So I've seen 3 of his 83 for 3% overall. In horror, I've now seen 3 of 5 for 60%. I'm just missing The Rogue's Tavern, which I also believe is from 1936, so I will be knocking that one out. The other one, I believe, is from 1928, if memory serves, and that's Haunted Island. Then to our writer of the screenplay is Martin. He's done this for 36 films and 5 shorts. I've seen 3 for 8%, all in genre. I've seen The Invisible Ghost, The Mad Doctor of Market Street, and now this. I have not seen Invasion of the Saucermen, The Eye Creatures, or The Rogue's Tavern. I've seen 50% of his output in genre. Over to the original writer of the novel, he has 23 adaptations of his works. First, that I've seen only 1 in genre. I'll then go to the cast, and I'll first start with Collier, who has been in 32 movies and 2 shorts. She's probably came up before. I've seen 12% of her overall works. In horror, she has 4. I've seen them all now with Murder by Television, The Ghost Walks, and Drums of Jeopardy, and now this. Then to her co-star of Hughes, he's been in 91 features and 1 short. I've seen 3. He may have come up with Drums of Jeopardy. Overall, I've seen 3% of his works. In horror, I've seen 3 out of 5 for 60%. I've also seen This and The Lost World. I have not seen The Mysterious Island and The Haunted Bedroom. Next up is Gray. He's been in 45 movies and 2 shorts. The first of his that I've seen, only 1 in horror. Now, I also have 2 others that I want to give credit here just because they had such a big career. First going to be Mahal, who is in 246 films and 15 shorts. I've seen 5 for 2%. He was in Cleopatra, like the grand one from 1934. In horror, he was in 4. I've seen 50%. I've seen 4 for 50%. He has 8 total. I've seen Black Friday, Invisible Ghost, 8 Man, and now this. I have not seen The She Creature, Ghosts on the Loose, The Rogue's Tavern, and Murder at Dawn. I'm also going to give credit here to St. John. He's been in 165 motion pictures, but even wilder, 105 shorts. This is the second of his that I've watched. The 2 that I've seen now are both of his in genre, which is going to be this and The Dead Men Walk. Alright, so for this movie here, though, we start by seeing a newspaper headline. It's about a killer from the synopsis. It states that an editor, Jean Monroe, portrayed by Collier, saw the face of the killer and can't identify him. This causes the hunchback killer to come after her. She flees out the window, trying to hail a taxi in order to get away. It then takes too long, so she just flees. Then her significant other, Frank Gordon, portrayed by Hughes, shows up. The driver isn't so lucky. Now, the 2 try to figure out what to do from here. It's decided that Jean won't go back to her place since it isn't safe. They go to the newspaper where they work, and they meet Harrison, portrayed by Flint. It is through this that they revealed that Jean didn't actually see the killer's face. It was more like a bluff, like a ploy that they put in the newspaper, and now it's put her life in jeopardy. While here, a note comes through asking Jean to come to a local theater. Ted Wallington, portrayed by Ball, is a dancer there, and he wants to be interviewed. She decides that it's a place to go to be safe since there's a lot of people there. This is far from the truth, though. Ted is happy to see her, but reveals that he didn't send the note. The power is turned off, and we see the Fiend is there. He fires a shot from his special gun, hitting Ted instead of Jean. Now, a cat-and-mouse game ensues. Jean and Frank relocate to a hotel housing the theater's dancers. Bumbling newspaper photographer Elmer, portrayed by St. John, joins the fray after colliding with the Fiend during his escape. Playwright Peter Fortune, portrayed by Gray, identifies the killer as a hunchback little person named Senshi and prompting a search. Meanwhile, Reardon, portrayed by Mahal, emerges as another suspect. With lives at stake, the deceptive evidence requires urgent scrutiny. So that's really my recap of the character. I want to start is that this is an actually early murder mystery film. It feels like it sets the stage for things that would be more prevalent in spy movies later. I'd also say that it's in line with elements that you'd see with like serials with Fu Manchu. Something that's a double-edged sword for it. It just right into it, and it took me a second to settle in. Like, it just jumps right into that first sequence. From there, I was engaged to follow the evidence and figure out who was behind these murders. Now that it's set up, let's transition to the antagonist, the Fiend. It is a compelling figure introduced early with a distinctive hunchback and wears a cape. His weapon, a gunfire and frozen poison, initially confused me due to a mismatched sound effect, or what I thought was, but the later explanation resolves that. While the weapon's logistics are questionable, I can accept it as movie magic. I mean, I've seen The Man with the Golden Gun. Effectively, this heightens the horror as it results in like autopsies defying logic, significantly deepening the film's intrigue, and it takes a little while to actually figure out what is actually happening here. So regarding the characters, the story starts abruptly. The newspaper headline claiming Jean can spot the killer is a clever ruse that builds tension by making her a target. Small interactions between characters further drive the plot, while the killer's identity isn't a major shock. The reveal and rationale are well executed, offering a satisfying, if familiar, conclusion. So other themes that were explored here, we're seeing the power and perils of journalism. There's a danger to the sensationalism of what the stunt that Jean is using. What I've also will learn here is that there is a theater that's kind of at the center of it, and it's troops that are being targeted, like they've been being picked off before Jean ends up becoming the next target. This does employ elements of like the Grand Guignol aesthetic. It's fitting that the play they're putting on is Satan's Bride. It's a dark in nature. There's a blend as well of sci-fi with the Fiend's weapon, as well as the gothic melodrama with how the villain looks being a hunchback. In the end, there are themes of professional jealousy and corporate sabotage, slightly being a look at capitalism. I'll then shift to discuss the acting. The performances are generally solid. Collier excels as a proactive lead whose independence and career are well defined despite Frank's proactive nature. Hughes, Gray, and St. John provide effective support, with St. John adding levity while aiding the investigation. While Mahal and the rest of the cast fulfill their roles, the red herrings could have benefited from further development. All that's left in before I do one little piece of trivia that's not even that great, but the filmmaking aspects. This is a Poverty Row production that is well made despite its small budget. While the cinematography, framing, music, sound design are standard for the era, I did appreciate the Fiend's look. My gripe is that this is a 66-minute runtime. See, I love how quickly it kind of flies through and being able to watch it so quickly. An extra 10 to 20 minutes for character development would have improved it. Still a fine film. I'm assuming they just didn't have the budget to, keep buying film or didn't necessarily know how else to kind of flesh things out, so I will digress. So the only piece of trivia, the earliest documented telecast took place in Chicago back in 1950. It would have been January on Channel 7. In Los Angeles, this was debuted in March of that same year. New York City, it would have been in August, and then Philadelphia in October. So this is probably one of those things where this, being a Poverty Row film, probably fell into public domain pretty quickly, or they just sold the rights to this for television, and that's why it appeared there. So in conclusion, this stands as a well-made and engaging murder mystery that effectively blends elements of gothic melodrama and early sci-fi. Driven by a compelling antagonist and a proactive lead, the film overcomes its small budget to deliver a terrifying experience. While its short runtime leaves some characters and red herrings feeling underdeveloped, it remains a solid example of early genre filmmaking that is worth a watch for fans of the era. So my rating for A Face in the Fog, I didn't necessarily love this one. I think it does some good things. It's an interesting early film trying to do some of this stuff, but I gave a 5.5 out of 10. So I'm not going to do a spoiler section. There's not anything additional I need to do here. So let me go ahead and get over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
Rise Coffee.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the PodNation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for my next episode is going to be another of my Scouring Through the Sixes, as the two featured reviews here are going to be The Macabre Trunk. This is a foreign film, I believe. I will get the actual, I have to double check the subs on that one, but that will be one of the featured reviews. And then I'm pairing this up with Forbidden Fruits. There's nothing coming to the Gateway Film Center that I wanted to check out. This is one I actually meant to see over there, just couldn't get it to work in my schedule. So those will be the two featured reviews that I have there. So then my Scouring Through the Sixes rewatch is going to be The Craft from 1996. And then I'm also going to give my 2026 rewatch is going to be The Bride, the one for The Bride of Frankenstein. And then I have a couple of screeners I'm going to be checking out, as well as I have another couple episodes of 100 Years of Horror. So that's all I have here for this outro, outside of saying that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending